Hi, good afternoon. This is Eric Moore. I am the chair of the Town Meeting Study Committee, Concord Town Meeting Study Committee. This is our meeting for July 23rd. We're the Experiences of Deliberation and Engagement Subcommittee. I'm going to vamp for just a couple of minutes while I wait for everybody to join. Katie Bresnick has volunteered to clerk today, so thank you, Katie.
You're welcome.
And again, we'll just wait for a few more people to join. We're expecting Kari Tare to join today. This is the Concord clerk. Again, welcome everyone. We're just waiting a minute or two for everybody to join. Great to see that Kari Tare has joined as well. I'm going to start with public comment. I'll take roll and then move into public comment. And then we'll go from there. So again, my name is Eric Moore. I'm the chair of the Concord Town Meeting Study Committee. Thank you everyone for joining today. Again, Katie Bresnick will be clerking today. Let's just go through roll in terms of the folks who are expected, and then we'll see who else joins later. Katie, would you confirm that you're on, please?
Yes, this is Katie Bresnick. I'm here.
Great, thank you. I don't see Kristen Hegarty yet. I don't see Alice Kaufman yet. I'm Eric Moore. And Phil Swain, would you confirm that you're here, please? Phil, you're on mute. Hang on a second. And
Yes,
I can
yeah.
see you. Oh, great. Thank you. All right, thank you. And again, everybody else is in a different subcommittee, and we're not really expecting them today. Our normal procedure is at the top of the meeting, public comment, limited to 15 minutes for up to 2 minutes per speaker. I see a couple of the members of the public today. I'd welcome any comment if you have any. Now would be the time. Just raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to carry on then. And we'll have more opportunities to comment in a more specific context as we go along. So thank you. Kari, let me welcome you. Thank you. I'm going to move into our first item. Actually, chair's comments. I have a couple of things. One, so you may have seen the email that Cameron McKinnon Mark Howell is going to switch out of being our select board representative ex officio, and then Cam McKinnon will be the representative for us. I haven't really heard anything more. I did send Cam a kind of an introductory package on what we're doing, and we'll just see how that plays out. Kristen Hegarty, would you just confirm that you've joined, please? Thank you, and we'll add you to the role as well. Yep, I see you. Thank you. Kari, again, thank you for joining. Let me just ask, did you have a chance to take a look at the meeting packet before the meeting? Just wondering how much talking I should do to bring you up to speed or not.
I did not have a chance to look at the packet, actually. I looked at the agenda.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just take a few minutes and walk you through. And again, thank you for joining. So part of the work that we expect to be doing is one or more surveys to the town. And I think a question that this group has been considering is just, you know, what participation patterns do we see? What gets in the way of participation? And how representative is the folks who we do see at town meeting relative to the overall population of the town. And you can look at representative in terms of different dimensions like age, locality, and so on. So we have a few broad, these are really broad questions about, again, what we're trying to understand in terms of characteristics of the town when it comes to voting and engagement. And so that translates to some potential data analyses. You know, looking at turnout for Concord relative to other towns, and you know what we see so far, what we believe so far is that Concord's pretty typical of town meeting in other towns, peer towns, as it were. You know, I'm curious, and we now have the data in hand, thank you, to see whether or not if changes to sort of in-person voting for elections has made a difference in turnout for local elections. You know, there are many confounding reasons with that too, but I'm really curious to see if we get a big difference in net turnout. You know, we know over time that, and this is in the data that you've provided, the reporting that you provided, that some issues get more people coming out than others. And I think, you know, Andover did a similar participation study, and they identified different kinds of issues that seem to sort of drive participation. And I think I'd like for us to be able to use the foundation that we already have to sort of make some assertions that way as well. And then I think, you know, we're curious as well about other demographic characteristics associated with participation patterns. And this relates in particular to families with school-age kids. So the participation is just sort of the gross turnout, right? I think the other question, though, is to understand representation, which is to say that, you know, is in a way that is the distribution of characteristics that we see at meeting. Is it an unbiased or is it a representative or fair way of looking at the overall town? And so you know, it's to say that, you know, is the bucket of folks, you know, in the 60 to 70 age range who we see at town meeting, are they more represented or less represented than the bucket of folks living in Concord in that age range? And so, you know, these are data questions. I'll skip over, you know, the ways that we might think about, you know, dimensions informing representation and participation. But, you know, again, it comes back to some of it comes back to demographics, including age range. And again, I think, you know, as we think about what's keeping people from getting out to town meeting, we wonder as well as to sort of what the motivators are and what the obstacles are. And some of that will be in the data that we might have access to. And some of that will be things that we need to elicit through a survey. And so that's what we'll be talking about, a survey as well later on. Kari, let me just pause for breath and see if you have any questions at this stage.
I just want to say that it's interesting, you know, wondering about the town meeting turnout and how it's affected or what affects it. And I think immediately of older age group tradition. So they're always going to be there, whether or not they're high interest articles or not.
Yeah.
And an age group that has more competing issues for their time is going to look more at issues.
Yeah, yeah, agreed and understood. In fact, one analysis that we did based upon the town meeting survey from just this previous meeting of attendees showed a pattern of what I'll say are sort of regulars, folks who come year over year and even night over night, and folks who were more motivated for one or two issues. Both are, you know, they're two really different. And Katie did a kind of a stratified a way of she looked at both kinds of attendee to see what their preferences were around the information that they took in and so on. That was really interesting. So we'd like to do more of that, in fact. So we, you know, there is data available to us, which a lot of it we publish or your office publishes, you know, Concord demographics, voter and election statistics. Now we have election records as well, back to almost 2000. Thank you. There's, you know, it's hard to say what we can do with the GIS if we don't have information that's not keyed to address or to a census block, but that information's there. And I think a big question, and there's also census information and other surveys. I think a big question is under what conditions might we be able to have access to town census information? I really recognize that there's personally identifiable information in that. So I just don't know about that, and we can come back to that question.
Well, I can answer that. I mean, resident information it's going to be similar to what voter lists look like.
Yeah.
Anyone aged 17 and older, that information is considered public, that is returned on census forms, and that is published in a street list. And so that information is available.
So that is name, address, in some cases, people fill out occupation.
Right?
In some cases, people fill out an email address.
No,
No,
we
no,
never
no
get
email,
No,
no email.
no.
Okay, good to know. An age,
And
uh,
age.
an age.
Mhm.
Uh,
Year of
and
birth.
so, and so to go about getting a copy, a digital copy of the street list, is that I can make a
That's
request to
very
you or?
easy. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Does that now is the street list keyed by voter ID?
Yes.
Okay. That's great. Great. So then with both the street list keyed by voter ID, where we can access the voter age or age range, then and looking at the voting turnout, then we can very authoritatively make a distribution by age over both the registered voters and the voter turnout per election.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's really cool. Let
There's
me
a lot
just
of
say,
data.
yeah. Yeah. Katie, I see your hand. Sorry for missing you
Yep,
earlier.
no, just
Yeah.
a quick question. I'm curious if this is registered voters or if this is all adult people in the town of Concord that's in the street list.
That's everyone who responds to the census that's mailed every year. So it includes active and inactive voters and non-voters.
And if I'm remembering correctly, this does not have information about like children in the household. Is that
Correct.
right? Okay,
Yes. 17 years and older is what can be published.
great. Thank
I
you.
would have, I know the election records show the party identification, DR or U.
Mhm.
I guess it is.
Or L.
Or L. Oh, yeah, well. Um, um, so I don't understand what an inactive voter is, relative to,
So an inactive voter is a voter who has not, for whom we have not received a current census return.
got it, for
And
3 years
it
or
is a
something
means
like
of
that.
keeping
Yeah,
our voter database up to date.
yeah,
So then we send out a notice of inactivation, which allows the voter to tell us, I've moved, I'm still here. If we don't have a response, they remain inactive through 2 state elections. If they
yeah,
do nothing, if we see no activity through 2 state elections, which is 4 years of never returning their census, voting, signing a petition or nomination paper, then they are deleted and a notice is sent to them, notifying them that they're deleted.
got it, thank you. So an active voter, is equivalent to a registered voter?
A registered voter who's current with their census.
Got it, registered with census. Good, thank you. Well, that's, you've made my day, so thank you. Um, so there are a couple of other surveys that either will be coming out from a Concord committee or that come out annually. And let me just ask about, so I've talked with Andrea Fonserrata, who's a co-chair of the DEI committee, and they're expecting to do a community survey this fall. And the timing of that is not, at least when we talked a few weeks ago, not settled. And I think that it would be a factor for us to think about whether or not we overlap or not. And there may be some operational questions there as well. But there's also the annual, I believe it's the Concord Residents Survey or the annual town government survey. And Kari, is that something that comes through your office? And do you have a feeling for the timing for that?
That does not come from my office. Actually,
Okay.
we mail the annual census out. And we
Yeah,
can mail other information out with it. Typically,
Yeah.
there's a census newsletter notifying people of upcoming elections and deadlines. And we can
Yeah.
certainly include more information with that.
got it. Carmen, hey, good afternoon. I see your hand raised, please.
Yes, that survey, it's, I don't think it happens every year. I think it happens every other year, and that is done through the town manager's office.
Got it. You wouldn't know offhand if this is a year for that or not.
Not offhand.
Okay, cool. Well, follow up there. Good. Thank you. And just, there are other towns have done interesting studies and we're, as we do our work, we'll try to make use of that as we can. I'm just gonna, before we talk about survey goals, um, uh, I see a few hands raised. Shannon, let me recognize you, please, and then I'll go to Alice.
Yeah, just quickly, I think this might be the year that the town manager's office does the survey because put it this way, I didn't hear anything about it last year.
Got it.
So
Um,
I think that might be this year.
And do you have a feeling for when that goes out?
I actually don't.
Okay.
I know that Donna and I both in passing have heard about this survey,
Yeah.
but we don't really know much about it.
Right. Okay.
But considering we didn't do it last year, I think this is the year.
Got it. Well, my obvious question, right, is there a way that we might be able to piggyback in the mailing for that with our survey?
So
Yeah.
if I can pipe up there, it isn't a mailed survey.
Okay.
The town hires a survey company to do this survey. It used to be that, they try very hard for it to be a statistically reliable survey. I want to say that it was done through telephone calls. And,
Wow.
today I really wonder how that could be statistically accurate because
Yeah.
many people do not have landlines.
Got it.
But the town, maybe Shannon, would it be all right if we tasked you with speaking with Kerry about that and finding out what the plan is with respect to the survey and whether there is any intended change in how it gets done? Typically, the questions that are asked, I think, well, in the past anyway, the questions that were asked were in the first instance drafted by the town manager's office, and there might be different departments who were interested in how people felt about certain town services, and those might get into the survey. And then the select board, I think, always had an opportunity to comment on anything that they wanted to go in that survey. And I cannot for the life of me remember what time of year it would happen, but I know that a professional firm was engaged to do it. And in general, those surveys came back with people very, very happy about their level of town services. So
Yeah. Thank you, Carmen. Yeah, Shannon, please, if you would, and then loop me in as well, please. And the question again is, to what degree might we be able to piggyback in terms of the canvas or in terms of getting some of our questions in the survey? And, I don't know the answer. So, Alice, I see your hand. Sorry to wait and keep you waiting.
Fine. So I just want to offer CMLP also does, Concord Municipal Light Plant does,
Yeah.
I think its annual survey. Just completed one this spring of general attitudes about how people feel about certain aspects of how we provide services for, electricity in town. And there are almost always questions about the cost of what that service is and whether it's reasonable among all costs. The other thing,
Yeah.
you have a question?
We'll talk about survey operation a little bit down on the agenda, but I'd like to come back to that because I'd like to understand more about the potential nuts and bolts of getting our potential survey out. But I'll come back to that if that's all right.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
I just want to also add that in thinking about townwide surveys, the Concord Bridge is intending to send out a Concord Bridge or how people get information about things that are happening in town. So a survey about communications is what we are planning on offering from the Concord Bridge, what people want to learn about, how they want to hear about it, and get general information about each of the respondents. And that would be, again, a professional survey team that would be putting that together, and it would it'll go to every household.
Is there a point of contact for me, or can you furnish a point of contact where I could talk more with them?
I don't think it's
Please.
a process yet, but I'll give you the person who you should talk to about it.
Good. Thank you. You can take that offline.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you. So survey goals, I've been doing some thinking about it, and This is what I came up with, and we'll discuss this, right? So I have three very high level goals. One is to get direction from the public, right? What concerns you? We have some ideas about, we will have some ideas about what we want to try or what we want to recommend. How does it land with the public? We'd like to know more about the public, right? What gets in the way of attending town meeting? What's important to you? So that's kind of like pretty clear. A second one is to show the public that we are doing what they asked, right? So for example, there were 3 citizen petitions at town meeting this year that concerned changes to town meeting. We need to ask about that and understand better what the public understands. I think there are other things that we should be asking about in terms of, there are probably other things that are going to be pretty obvious questions we want to make sure that we address. But I think, again, show the public that we are doing the job that they gave us to do is a piece of this. It helps our credibility and we learn something. And then the third thing is to really sort of understand the public better. I think there's one thing about going, hey, we like this idea, we don't like this idea. But again, to sort of unearth or try to understand better public attitudes about participation, about engagement, about how much do they really how much confidence do they have in what town meeting is doing for the town. So at a really high level, those are the 3 things that surfaced for me. I took a look this morning at the town meeting survey from 1995 from the previous town meeting study commission. And it looks as though there were 2 instruments there. One was a survey that focused on really gauging the public's understanding, looking at participation patterns and attitudes. And it looks as though, I can't be clear about this yet, but it looks as though that another piece of work, it's reported in one of the white papers, was a survey on interventions. What do you think of this and what do you think of that? So I'll say that the previous survey is actually really interesting, and we'll hear more about that, but not today. Just checking. Yeah, Katie, please.
Just one comment about the goals, and this is something I was thinking of. I watched the recording of the last meeting from the logistics group. And I heard that there was like some talk around like needing or encouraging more participation throughout the year from folks in order to make a shorter town meeting. And I guess I just thought it would be important to learn from respondents how much they would like to be involved throughout the year, because I think it's quite possible that folks don't really actually have the time. And like Parashar was saying, like people need it to be easy, like the agenda needs to come to their email so they don't have to go digging around with links upon links. So I think understanding, do people just want to show up to town meeting once a year and vote on the items at the point where they are? Or not? Do people want to be involved throughout the year? I think that will be something that is important to understand a little bit better.
Totally agree. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Breaking this down a little bit more detail, I think someone raised the question, look, so we want to ask about something so that we can use that information somehow. I wanted to use this table to sort of communicate that thinking, right? How do we focus our attention on the public's needs? How do we identify what matters to the public? As we make choices, as we sort of, rule some things out and try to come up with the right recommendations, how can we act well as the public's proxy? What constraints are people dealing with? And part of it is information access, part of it is schedules and opportunity costs. It helps us to understand that better. I say this every meeting now. I don't know what I don't know. And, we want to make it possible for the public to easily inform us what they're thinking about that we haven't talked about, because I think the unknown unknowns are really, we learn a lot from those. Part of the bits about, trying to get, age and address and, or locality and so on is to understand how, of the survey responses that we get, how representative are the survey responses of the overall community, so that we can sort of understand what biases there might be in the responses that we get or from that. And then finally, again, that we're doing what you think we'd be doing if we were doing it right. So that's how I thought about this. And what I came out with was a rough structure. Maybe the graphic design is not so solid here, but that there are these different categories of information, base demographics, age, locality, attitudes about town meeting, local government, and democracy. Just how do you feel about how things are going in terms of our local government? How important is town meeting to you? How important is participation to you? Are you content with how things are going? And then I think the third piece is understanding the dynamics of engagement, right? For the folks who really don't engage very much, what gets in your way? For the folks who do engage some, what brings them out? What are the differences in values between the folks or priorities between the folks who are showing up and the folks who are not showing up? And I'll say that the 95 survey is actually has a lot of questions about this question of what are your attitudes and priorities around engagement. So that's a very good model for us. And I think a question will be, isn't the information in that survey likely to still sort of carry forward 25 years later to the attitudes of our town today? And then, the questions around, hey, if we did this, here are the pros and cons for this. How do you respond to that? Would you think that would be highly useful or not so useful? And again, I see two different populations. One, a population or subpopulations, one that really doesn't show up to town meeting, is not that interested in town meeting, maybe is not that highly engaged. And, the opportunity for us is to get them more engaged, but I think we also need to understand, where they're at and why they're at where they're at. And the other population is folks who would want to come to town meeting or do come to town meeting, and how can their experience be better? And clearly, from what we've talked about before, the way we hope to serve those people better. We can't drag people to town meeting, but the folks who want to be there, we want them to be there more easily and to have a better experience. I'll pause for comments if anybody has any comments or reactions to this, and we'll go to the public in just a second. Let me I'll take one more slide and then go to the go for public questions. And I think one fundamental question, right, is why aren't people engaging, right? I've been thinking about this, and if it's that people don't know about things, or if it's too hard to get information, we have an information awareness problem. We can address that in the way that we approach communication and publishing. If it's that people just don't care, right, then maybe if they understood government a little bit better, they might care more. It might be that they're disaffected and they don't care. I don't know, but that if you don't really care about town meeting, like to understand why, and we have to meet people where they are. It could be that people just don't like. We had some comments at the previous meeting where there was some high contention. That kind of contention, that kind of debate just makes people uncomfortable. And so, maybe it's that I don't like government, right? Or that it's just arguing and I don't like that. So I think, there we can look at the participation experience, how deliberation is happening at meeting. The thing that we all think about is our high opportunity costs, that folks are just too busy to commit, 10 hours in 1 week over a bunch of evenings to town meeting. Could be all of the above. And then finally, I think we talked about this in the previous meeting, that maybe, folks feel that they don't need to come, right? Things are going well. The folks who are engaged are doing a good job, and I'm content with not participating. So these are not clearly survey questions, but when I think about trying to get at attitudes around non-engagement, this is what's surfacing for me and things I'd like to explore. So let me pause there. I'll go to Kari first. If you have any comments or questions about this, and then Carmen, I see your hand as well, and then we'll go to the public as well. So Kari, if I may.
I think this is a good approach. I mean, learning about trying to cover all the bases of why we have so few voters showing up at town meeting. There's got to be a reason. Either they don't care, or anything that's been presented here, they can't make it.
Good, thank you.
and whatever's
you.
in between.
Carmen, I'll go to you, please.
Thanks, Eric. I think this is a great approach. I did just unearth the what may be the most recent report on the town government satisfaction survey, which is dated January 2021. And I sent that to Shannon to distribute to everybody and copied you, Eric. But they have changed the methodology. The methodology now is they mail a copy of this survey. And the last one looks like it was done in 2020. And they used Pacific Market Research. They mailed a survey to every household in Concord. So that's 7,065 residents, or at least it was at that point. It may be more now. And they got 16.8% of the households responded to a 46 question survey. And they had an option to call a toll-free number, complete a paper questionnaire and dropping it off at the townhouse, or mailing it, or going to a website and doing the survey online. The most interesting thing is that there is there's a chart, a bar chart of response by age group to the survey, and
Yeah.
it looks kind of just like town meeting.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
So it's just interesting.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Dinos Ganatas, I see you as a member of the public. I'll recognize you in 2 minutes, please. Thank you for joining. You're on mute.
Am I still on mute?
No, you're good. I can hear you. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. So Carmen brought up some great points. And first of all, with respect to the survey results, making sure that they're representative of the town. So she brought up the age distribution. I think another thing that you could use as a variable to look at that is town meeting participation. So if half the respondents say that they regularly attend town meeting, well, obviously then you know that's something that to take into account. Somewhat orthogonal to that, I hope it's not too far off topic, but as far as attending town meeting, I think it's worth noting that at least from my experience, it's much more effective as a method of public participation, not so much town meeting, but participating in the smaller groups like this one, or the going into the select board, or talking to select board meetings, where you actually get to go into issues in depth, one-on-one with a select person, as opposed to just being one of a large number of people. Where at town meeting, not all the issues, but many of them are really ratifying things that town committees have already approved. And so they have that stamp of approval from the town. So you're kind of going against the grain. If you disagree, then you're going to be almost always in a significant minority. And so that's not really a very effective form of participation. So
good.
My comments.
Those are great. I think I recognize the opportunity as well for citizens to have greater impact upstream in the policymaking process. So thank you for that. David Allen, member of the public, I'll recognize you as well, please.
Thanks.
David, your audio quality is very, very poor. I'm not
at a premium.
Your audio quality is very
I was
poor.
sorry about that.
Oh, there we go. Now you're better.
Look,
All right,
let me try to
take it from the top,
relocate
please.
and
Yeah.
come back here in a moment.
Okay. All good. Thank you.
Carol, better now? Gracious. Confirming we're in Maine. We're in Maine.
Okay.
Bandwidth is at if it gets a little better, might justify go out on the porch here. Does that work? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound good. Thank you.
I'd like to go up, as it were, to the 30,000 foot level, if I could, for a moment. Draw a distinction here. See whether or not it's helpful. In rough terms, I want to suggest the committee has, as far as the information part is concerned, two almost diametrically opposite roles. One is to collect information from the town, but the other is to disseminate information,
Mhm.
to, among other things, do some educating. That town meeting is a legislature. And to go back to Dino's quite, I thought, helpful observation that, and this goes to earlier in the discussion as well, that these governing activities occur really across the year, as Dino's points out, in smaller groups such as select board or planning board or something like that. I'm meaning to use this as an illustration of the educational part of the committee's role. Yes, they will tend to collide a little bit in what you do, but I want to suggest seeing that these are almost opposites of each other. And of course, planning as you go ahead to make that effective. Gather information, but then plan the occasions when you're going to do a little educating about, for instance, that it's legislative. If you come to town meeting because you want to deliberate, yes, you vote, but you deliberate. And as already said, that you do that successfully by participating upstream across the year. Don't know if that's helpful, but I hope that it is. Certainly my view of it. My sense that it'll be quite important finally for the educational phase. When you get around to, for instance, asking about the three, as you pointed out, Eric, the three articles put forward town meeting in the spring, crucial education I think you're going to offer when people start suggesting choices to you there. Thanks.
Good, thank you, David. Okay, so moving forward into how do we conduct this survey? And I'll say the first problem, so to speak, is how do we get it out there? And there's both modality and cost. So you know, mailing a paper survey or mailing a card with a link to all households has a cost, and I think I'm not sure how to do that. So I'm the first person I'm gonna ask is Kari. A second approach. Let's just talk about the different approaches, right? All households as a paper insert with something else. So it could be the light plant survey, the CMLP survey. It could be with the town census. Those it could be with the town manager's survey. Those surveys go out on kind of a calendar, and the question would be whether or not our survey lines up well with their calendar. A third approach, all households as an insert via the bridge. I assume that would be a paid insert, or perhaps there are some questions that the bridge might find congruent in terms of their information seeking interest as well. But I doubt very much that we could get everything that we're curious about into their survey. But that's a potential option. And you know, it's all households or is it some households? So for example, I believe the DEI survey went on to a sample of households. And then the question is just, you know, how large is that sample? We don't know in terms of not knowing what the costs are like. I don't know that. We can figure out how to randomize that. Now, a different approach to canvassing is to do it digitally. And here I'm wrong about something, all right? My thought was, oh, golly, can we use all registered voters and, you know, use the points of contact in the voter registration, the town census? And the answer to that is no, because we don't have the email addresses. You know, we could run an ad. I read a letter to the bridge, but then run an ad in the bridge over multiple weeks. And then, you know, I have a separate survey in mind, which is to look at town government volunteers. But the problem that I see with the digital canvas is just that we don't get the samples a bit less controlled in terms of how we canvas. Let me just go back to Kari and say, well, I'll come back to you in a second, Katie. Sorry, what can the town what can the town do for us in terms of getting a canvas a card out to all households? Is that a normal thing?
I think that surveys have, as you mentioned earlier in the meeting, surveys do go out from the town. The annual census, in a way, is a survey of residents. And, the response rate really depends on the year. Not so much the time of year that it's mailed out, but the year. And so what's the hook? What gets people to respond to
mhm.
the census and, having a large number of elections in a year? Reminding people about inactivations. Those
Right.
are all things that gets them to respond. What's the hook for town meeting? I think that the Concord Bridge did a great job about getting people interested in voting. Having ballots sent out to people who requested ballots for all elections this year.
Mhm.
Increased the turnout because they weren't necessarily going to ask for another ballot,
Mhm.
but because they received a ballot, they were more inclined to vote, and having articles in the Concord Bridge helped that as well. So I think it's a combination of bringing it in front of people, and whether it's through infographics or, whatever works to let people know the impact of their response.
Thank you. Let me go to Katie and then I'll come back. Katie, please.
Yeah, just a comment from earlier and talking about sampling. I think it would actually be like quite complex to do any rigorous sampling of the town, that if it is possible to mail out or reach out to all members of the town, that I think would be the most robust way to do this.
Yeah, understood. So if it costs, I don't know what it costs, right? But if it costs $5,000 to print cards and then to mail them to each household, how would, if I approach I guess it's a town manager question, right? And not necessarily a clerk question, but if we need $5,000 to send out cards to the town, how can that happen? And is that your decision, Carrie, or is it someone else's?
That's a budget question.
Yeah.
So
That's the
it's
town
just the
manager.
means of
Yeah.
the resources
Yeah.
to do it, yeah.
Yeah.
And then compiling them.
Yeah.
How does that
Yeah.
get done? Is it
Well,
anonymous, or,
Yeah.
how is it coded?
Yeah, sure. I think my assumption is that we would record responses anonymously. As long as we have access to the data set, I think we've got the skill and resources to do the analysis ourselves. That's a little bit different than most committees. And so if we want to economize, we can do the analysis. But we can't hand deliver the cards.
Right.
So,
And there's also
yeah.
the public information aspect.
Uh-huh.
So if people are requesting public records
Yeah.
after the fact,
Yeah.
their information is public.
Right.
So
So any survey
exemptions are,
responses, yeah.
yeah. Survey responses and what would be excluded from survey responses depends a lot on who sees them,
Yeah.
how they're talked about. And so inadvertently, there could be,
Uh-huh.
things could be public that may not have been intended to be public.
Got it. Who owns privacy policy for the town? Who would own the application of regulations around public records?
It's the public records law. And there are clearly defined exemptions in the public records law.
Got it. So we need to know the law, period.
Yes,
Okay.
depending on the circumstance. So it's important to put
Yeah.
the scenario in front, and it may be town council who ends up
Okay.
opining on it.
Right. So follow up with the town manager about what our intentions are there too.
Mhm.
Good, thank you. Alice, I'm going to recognize you and then Carmen. Alice, please.
I just wanted to offer, I'm not understanding what you want to insert, what a card has on it. When you're talking about a card, is it be on the lookout for town survey? I don't understand what you're looking for, because I'm trying to.
Yeah, it would actually be the stuff on the right here. So imagine you get an index card, Alice Kaufman, address. You flip it over and it says, please take this this survey on an important survey on our local democracy and town meeting. So there'd be a simple URL that you type it in without getting lost. There'd also be a QR code. Would need to be clear about it's coming from our committee, and a contact for us, why we're doing this, why it matters. We'll have it open for some window, maybe it's 30 days, I don't know, and how long to expect to take. So that blurb needs to fit on basically a postcard, I would think, or if it's in a flyer, that goes into the newspaper or an article, it needs to fit that space. But to me, that's the information that matters. And if it had to be one thing, it would be a QR code.
So I would just offer, as I've said, I can't make a commitment for the newspaper. But this looks like a perfect partnership opportunity where rather than have the town spend money to put an insert in the paper that's only this big.
Right.
Ask the bridge, I don't know what they'll say, that we include a QR code for a townwide survey, because it
Yeah.
already goes to every address, meaning it goes to all businesses as well.
Right.
And it would have the QR code without having to do another printing and
Right.
mail or distribution. Use the paper that does that already.
Sure.
Might be a better option for getting it out to everyone. The other idea, I think we've all seen this on newspapers, is if you want it separate, you can put a sticker on the outside, you've seen those.
Oh, yeah.
Applications. But I think what you're basically doing is you want to get the information to the public, to every household, that there's a survey. And here's the QR code to reach it. That gets people who are inclined to want to do it digitally,
Right.
something digitally. And you need information for those who really want it on paper.
Good.
Stop by the town,
Yeah.
have a paper version if you prefer.
Right. Good. Thank you. So you'll let me know who to talk to, and then I'll talk to them. Good. Thank you. Carmen, recognizing you, please.
Thanks. So I think that there are lots and lots of piggybacking opportunities that should minimize the cost here. I think ideally you minimize paper and do as much of this digitally as you can, which means that the QR code is a great idea. One department that's had a lot of experience with this is the planning department, and the housing folks. They've done, and the recreation department as well. There have been a lot of surveys that have been done recently, lots of them involving QR codes. They have been on sandwich boards around town. They have been published in news and notices. Then I think that a real key is to go where the people are in order to get folks to focus on this, which means you have a QR code and you can get the PTGs to all put it in their newsletters. That will focus on the audience of parents of school-aged children. The seniors have a little newsletter that goes out. The environmental people have newsletters that go out. The legal voters have a newsletter. Everybody's got a newsletter. You can get your QR code in there. And then there may be an opportunity to leverage 8th grade civics and the community service requirement for the high school. So if you had no paper surveys, but you were only doing them on an iPad, it wouldn't be that hard to create a phone bank and, have high school kids call people and ask them if they would complete the survey, and then they could do it online, asking people the questions. Similarly, you could split it up into neighborhoods and look for volunteers to talk to their neighbors, and to just show up at the door with an iPad, and ask people to fill out the survey or have a survey party, have coffee at your house and invite people over to take the survey. But I think that unless you actually, it takes a little bit of commitment to sit and answer the questions, and it is, you know, personally, I got a really bad pile in my kitchen, and
Yeah.
it doesn't take long for stuff to get lost in it, and I mean to do it.
Yeah.
But you know, if someone calls me on the phone or shows up at the door, or if it's part of some event that is fun, like a social event, then I'm probably more likely to do it. So those are my thoughts.
Got it. Thank you. I think, yeah, there's going to be a constraint for us in terms of how much energy we have to resource to publicize as well. I think, you know, part of what you're saying is we need to have a campaign for the survey as well. And I think it'll be what we're able to do the lift for as well. But together, get other people excited would help a lot. So good. Thank you. Shannon, if I may ask you, I think, you know, there's a opportunity, quote unquote, for the town sends out a lot of different surveys, or different groups within the town send out different surveys. We use different ways of getting the surveys out, different outside consulting services, design surveys as well. But I almost wonder if, you know, what would it be like, quote unquote, if we had a monthly survey coming out from the town on this topic or that topic? And is there a communications function of the town that would be well served by having an ongoing survey capability? So I don't know who to talk to at the town level about that, but you know, looking at a bigger picture for surveys, there's the tactical question about how to get our survey out this fall. And there's a bigger question about, is that an interesting function for the town? And if there's anybody to connect to have that conversation, that would be nice as well. Please.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear. The idea is a monthly survey, and it would have different questions on it.
Yeah, perhaps. You know, one of the things that came out of I don't want to get derailed, sorry. One of the things that came out of the 1996 Town Meeting Study Committee report was the idea of a communications officer for the town. It's not clear to me that that happened, or if that position is still there. But, you know, something that came up in a previous meeting was this idea of sort of a townwide feed of like everything that happened in policymaking this week. You know, so that's outbound, but a way of getting inbound information from the community in a coordinated way could be part of the communications function. I'm not saying we should go do that.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
yeah.
there are ways on Civic Plus, like if you go to the homepage, there's the news and notices, and anyone can subscribe to the news and notices, just like how you can subscribe to a board or committee to get notices when their meeting agendas get put up. But so, you know, we could easily put a survey in there.
Yeah.
That being said, that function is really only as useful as I think the number of subscribers. And you would then have to think about, it's going to be the same list of subscribers that are getting the notifications about the surveys. And, you know, one of the most popular ways internally that we get, or we try to get the word out about surveys is, you know, we keep a list of board and committee chairs. And so that email list can sort of be used to blast information out, like, please share this with your full board and committee. But yeah, otherwise it's like just trying to get enough traffic on the town website. But also, you know, the town manager does have a weekly report where it's not just town manager's office doings. It's whichever department submits a weekly report can have their information included in that, and those get posted on the town manager's webpage and are generally included in select board meeting packets.
Cool, thank you.
Yep.
Katie Bresnick, I see you. I'll recognize you.
Yes, just a quick comment. I really like Carmen's idea of like piggybacking on groups that already exist within the community. Because I
Yeah.
think if we use a lot of these town resources, we're probably going to get the same folks who are attending town meeting already. And so finding ways to reach the community that isn't through the general town communications would, I think, allow us to expand and get the why people aren't involved a little bit more clearly.
Good, thank you. That was clear. A few other kind of nuts and bolts things. I think a few things to figure out in terms of delivery, right? We've been talking about that. I want to just focus on design question, and maybe Katie, this is something we need to think a bit about. But you know, we have again, you know, a group of folks who don't really come to town meeting. And if we're really successful, we might get some of them to go, yeah, actually, I'll do this. We have another group of folks that would like to come and find it awkward, and another group of folks who sort of come no matter what in a way. And so the folks who'd like to come but find it awkward, we'd like to serve them better as well, and we'd like to make everybody's experience at meeting better. And so it's almost like, you know, we could look at different surveys for those different populations if we had a way to address them. And, you know, through voting records, we could identify, you know, high participation, low participation voters and send a survey, you know, target different surveys that way. We're going to make use of the previous Concord survey. I think we'll look at that critically. And I think I would like to as well, as a separate survey, address the population of folks who volunteer on town committees and boards, and either are doing it now or have done it over, say, the past 5 to 10 years. And so that, you know, I'm not exactly sure how the green cards are represented, but Kari, I think that there's a database of people who've either actively volunteered, have indicated an interest of volunteering, and who have volunteered. Is that something that we could use to target a digital survey with?
I would have to find out, because there is not all the information in the database is public.
Uh-huh.
And so once something is shared, it becomes public.
Yeah.
So that's something that we'd have to look at.
Yeah. So it, categorically speaking, it would be that, you know, we construct a survey, it's digital, there's a URL, and that perhaps, you know, through your office, you're able to email out a link to the survey and a blurb about it. That's a hypothetical, but so that we wouldn't that information would not be leaked, so to speak, outside of your office, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Carmen, I see your hand, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say the other issue is I'm very familiar with that database, and I don't know that there is a way to separate out, you know, I don't know that there's a way you could do a distribution list, because it isn't intended to be used that way. It's you know, in order to use it for a mailing, it's not really that kind of program.
Yeah. Okay. So Kari, I'll take as a follow-up for me to follow up with you in due course about that, if that's okay, please.
Sure.
Good, thank you. Any other nuts and bolts concerns that come to mind for folks who've been thinking about surveys or doing surveys? Katie, I see you, please.
Yeah, when I was processing your first couple of points here about like doing one big survey versus multiple.
Yeah.
I think the ideal scenario for an analysis would be having one big survey, and that way we could partition things out a little bit more clearly, not have multiple people responding to multiple surveys, which I'm assuming would happen if we had multiple surveys. And it would allow us to understand better the coverage of the like response rate for the survey, having
Sure.
one. So I think that would be the ideal, and keeping it as short as possible given the broad groups we want to focus on.
Good, thank you. Alice, I see you, please.
I just wanted to offer, you know, as we're looking at nuts and bolts, and there are a lot of ideas are flying out there about the ways that we communicate. I think that we would be better served if we actually developed our own communications plan for how we plan and how that will evolve over time. So in that, we look at all of the things we were just mentioning as options for how we reach out to people. But if we could actually figure it out when to use each one of those, you map it out in a strategy that will carry us through to the distribution of the survey. So I'd be happy to help them work on that. If anyone else wants to do that with me, that'd be great.
Cool, thank you.
So basically a roadmap.
Yeah.
For how to communicate
Sure.
in all the different ways, because we know that no one way is going to work. We need to be at this in all different directions.
Uh-huh.
The newspaper alone won't be enough. News and notices alone won't be enough. So we need to out and the timing of each one of these. And if we go to Carmen's idea where there are so many other groups already experienced in communicating, like the planning board and the finance committee, what their schedules are, so they get factored into our plan for how we reach out, pays attention to their work. So it's just a way for us to have a roadmap to get us for all bases.
That would be really good. Please and thank you, Alice. I think the earliest, speaking magically, the earliest that we would be ready to have a survey out would be by mid-September. Magically speaking, right? You know, Kristen Haggerty, I want to recognize you, please.
Thanks for putting all this together, and I've appreciated the comments that have been made so far. I guess I'm thinking we have a significant amount of data already, relatively recently. You know, the 2020 town resident survey has data that's relevant to, you know, what we're looking for. It does seem like we might not need a separate survey, that some of the surveys that are happening already could be made to include what we're looking for. And so timing wise, I don't know how that's going to work, but I mean, what I'm seeing just from the 2020 survey and, you know, the data from there, and then the 1996, which is, you know, relatively old, but it's good for comparison, is I think we're all kind of getting at the same thing, which is like satisfaction with the town in a number of different facets. And that's, I think, ultimately what we are trying to understand, right? How satisfied are you with the town? And so I guess I want to caution us to veer farther away than we need to from maybe either planned activities or something like that, and instead try to streamline it and say, okay, well, same population we're trying to, you know, survey, we have, you know, 80% of the information is the same, you know, that kind of thing. And so that would be my caution, is to say, you know, if the town is already going to do one anyway, which I understand we have to find out, and it might not be until, you know, later than we need information, I would see how we could work with at least that one. The DEI one, you know, might be a little bit different. And then I guess the second thing is, and this is it, so the second thing is goals. You had kind of these nice high level goals, but it would be really good to kind of drill down as the next part, which I imagine what you're doing, and to say, okay, well, you know, these are the high level goals, but then specifically, this is kind of what we're looking to hear from people. And then if we were to do that, we'd be like, oh, well, we're already getting that at the, you know, the townwide survey or something like that. But I think having that next level of goals would be useful. And then the third thing is, it was interesting that, you know, Katie, you were saying, I agree, make the survey as short as possible. But that you, I think you were saying, I forgot. But it made me think, this survey person that I worked with many years ago was like, you know, you can make it a short survey, but kind of make it a conversation almost. So when people respond, so you ask them relatively, you know, approachable questions, and then they respond. And then, you know, if they're interested, you can give them the next level of questions. And so I know you were talking about focus groups, but that's one way to kind of keep it relatively short. But then there's kind of more of a back and forth dialogue. So what you get out is richer. And then there's also the other thing that, you know, when you entice people to complete a survey, is like, we're going to share this information with you. But I'm just thinking about ways to, you know, better engage folks. So sorry. The main thing was, do we need a completely separate survey, or is there a way that we can piggyback on something else happening in the fall to optimize kind of the return?
Yeah, I hear that. I'm digesting that. Let me go to Carmen and then I'll come back to you if I may. Carmen, please.
Thank you, Eric. I really like Alice's idea of a communications plan, and I'd be delighted, Alice, to work with you on that. And another kind of bullet on the communications plan that I would add is events. I recall, for example, the select board has always had a little bit of difficulty drumming up enough volunteers to appoint to the myriad committees and boards that exist in town. And there was one year that a couple of members of the board sat at a table under a tent, a pop-up tent at the Ag Fair with green cards. And it was remarkable how many people stopped by to see, like, what are you here for? And to learn about opportunities, and all kinds of volunteers came out of it. So it's just, there are lots of events in the fall. And if you can find a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout or a high school kid or a member of the League of Women Voters who's willing to sit at a table with a survey, I think we're going to get a lot more input. So, but as Alice said, part of a broader plan, we're going to have to come at this from as many directions as we have the capacity to come at it from.
Got it. Good. Thank you. So, Kristen, kind of to me, you made an argument for parsimony. What I mean by that is let's not go ask more than we need to. What can we use? And to me, I think what comes to mind is to sit down and write a survey that asks all of the questions, I'll say me, that all the questions I'd like to ask, and then go, A, is it really useful? B, is it something that we think we already know based upon either parallel work or prior work? C, who else would be interested in knowing the answer to this question, and can they ask it? And D, finally, what is uniquely a high priority information question for us, and that could be the core of what we seek to do through a survey or through some other instrument. So I think and I think to look at it in a more rigorous way is to challenge the idea that we actually need a survey, right? Again, look at our information needs, look at how we want to apply that information, see what our real unknowns are, and then think about, again, perhaps in the context of a communication plan or an information seeking plan, how to best sort of arrive at that information. Because it could be that we know enough, right? And that the right thing to do is to conduct 5 focus groups of 7 people each, drawn from the right portion of town, and we'll learn enough that way to really sort of inform what we need to recommend. I don't know about that, but I think it's to step back again and go, what do we really need to know that we don't know? Yeah. So that we're just after the hour, and that brings me to the end of what I prepared for conversation. Let me step back and ask if there's any comment. I'll ask the public if there's any public comment at this point in terms of actually getting this information seeking, this survey done. Any comment or questions about that? David Allen, I see you. I'll recognize you.
How's the audio? Is it still working?
You want to go back outside?
Unfortunately, I am out.
Oh, golly. All right.
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If you
Fair
can't
enough.
hear it,
Yeah.
you can't go anywhere.
Okay, you're good enough. Thank you.
All right, well, I'll try. Quite struck by your last point there, Eric.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way. What would you do with the information? Or even stronger, you almost have to know where you want to go. So then you can say, oh, I need this information to be able to get there. again, let me, if I might, reinforce your observation, but in the following form. You want to ask questions when those questions will lead to some action on the committee's part going down the road. What are you going to do with the information? I think is the most operational form of that. If I could as well, please, really, in part in the way of informing myself, Katie, I quite appreciated your observing that instead of trying to get a rigorous sample, just go to everybody. Naturally, the question that comes along after that, again, this is the way of educating myself, perhaps some of the rest of us. So you're only going to get a certain portion of those folks coming back. Unavoidably, we know how it works. How do you know about the representativeness of the group that comes back? By the configuration questions you ask at the end, but how do you handle that representative question when you have asked of everybody? Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, do you want me to comment?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, I think it's always going to be a struggle. I actually don't think we're going to ever get representative data. I think it's just asking enough questions in the beginning of a survey to be able to describe who we're describing, to be able to kind of contextualize our results within that frame. There are always going to be people who aren't going to respond. And I mean, I think what we might want to do is ask enough questions to then compare with, let's say, the census information for our town as what we consider the kind of the gold standard. In terms of sampling versus reaching out to the whole town, I think the only real thing, given the data we have for sampling, what we could do is like a random sample of the town. But in both cases, I think it's going to be, response rates aren't going to be 100%. So if we just do a select set of the town versus the whole town, we're going to end up with fewer responses and still a not representative population. So we'll end up with less data that is, I guess, just less data in general. So I guess I think the more data, the better. And then being able to describe the results within the context of, who's responding is what we can do.
That's
Yeah,
very helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, we do what we can afford. And then ask the information that we need to sort of accommodate for the limitations of our sample in a way.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And I think, you made an interesting point as well, David, that and looking at our information seeking in terms of maximizing parsimony, that's I'll say a selfish way to look at it, right? This is what information do we need to make the recommendations and decisions that we feel we need to do. But I think, as you said earlier, that there's also a broader audience for the information that we could be seeking. There's a broader audience for understanding the essence of what we're about in terms of our attitudes and preferences, and that's the town as a whole. And so I think part of the value of the survey is how we think about how the town as a whole would benefit from the information we might be seeking. So point well taken. Kristen Haggerty, please.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I was looking, if the 1996 town meeting survey, and I didn't realize it was that comprehensive in terms of the number and types of questions. And I mentioned that because as a result, if you look at the actions that were taken, it's fairly limited in terms of the actions that were taken. And sorry, I'm trying to see my screen here. And and yet we are still kind of experiencing the same things they were experiencing in 96.
Yeah,
so it's
that's true.
So I'm like, well, and not to assume that things have or have not changed, but I do like the idea maybe of putting more of a fine point on this and say, okay, these, really are the things that we want to gauge people's attitudes about. Not everything, but these things, to David's point, because these are the types of things that we would recommend changing. And I guess the biggest thing that I think that there's potential to change and really attract people is the length of the meeting, right? And we, could, and I would almost formulate I would try to formulate as many questions around that as possible, and what affects the length of the meeting. And then
Yeah.
the second biggest attitude thing that I don't think was necessarily in 1996, and that certainly isn't captured well, I don't know, in the 2020 resident survey, is kind of the added that engagement with neighbors, right? The how civically or how willingly we're able to listen to other people and things like that. And so those two things I think would be markedly different than any other survey that we've had so far. And so just
Yeah.
understanding, do we want a shorter and more focused and quite different survey, in which case, then I could see it being distinct, as opposed to, really there was quite a bit of information in the 96 survey. So some
Yeah.
things to consider.
Yeah, thank you. I think some of the questions around civic attitudes that I think you've identified, I think belong in our survey. I'm not sure if they belong in the group that's targeted to folks who are already engaged or the folks who are disengaged. I don't know, maybe everybody, but I think there's a place for them. I don't have a draft in front of me, and I do think the right thing to do is to attempt a draft and a mega survey and see how we can work from that. It might be that there are multiple paths through a single instrument, and that would affect the choice of platform. Katie Bresnik, I'll recognize you, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think the reason before I was speaking about having like a small set of questions is really to maximize response rate. So like the least amount of time we can take up from people, the more likely they're going to actually finish it and send it to us or submit it, especially with different logistics of how we might build this into a platform and whether you can go back or forward or save where you are and come back, which people probably won't do. And I really appreciate David's point about like, we want to ask questions that would potentially lead to an actionable change and something we don't know already. And I think, and maybe it is having the set of questions, Eric, that you're mentioning, like putting the survey together and talking about what the impact of that specific question would be and whether or not it makes sense to keep in a survey.
Yeah.
And I think some pieces of data that we don't have already surround, and correct me if I'm wrong, the like why people aren't participating. So we have data from people who do participate and why it's hard to participate. And I think a little more around why people aren't participating or what their desire to participate is and what the barriers to doing that will help target potential intervention. And I think assessing people's interest in what changes we are interested in making potentially, like Kristen's point about the length of the meeting. And it could be also a small opportunity for education, saying like, if we shorten the length of the meeting and these are the things that we're missing, like, would you want the short meeting or do you want a longer meeting that keeps those elements? And so use that as an opportunity for people to understand what the implications of change could be.
Good, thank you. I hear a potential for two surveys. One, the base survey, and then if you really want to talk more about this, here's a second survey. Kristen, I'll recognize you, please.
That's helpful information. And it's interesting, Katie, that you say that, because you say why people don't participate is something we understand. And I feel like that question we've asked a lot, and they say, oh, childcare, blah, blah, blah. And so I almost want to frame it in terms of what would make you participate.
Yeah, right.
Because, and it was interesting because seeing kind of the survey results of the 1996 study, there were a lot of negatively asked questions. And I feel like in general, those are harder for people to answer and it makes analysis harder. So I think, yeah, let's not even go for like what the barriers, but say, what would make you participate? And then, and then we could have, I really like the idea of kind of the Likert scale, 1 to 5 or something, so that you can gauge people's relative, interest in certain things. Like I want it to be faster. I want more deliberate. These things are important to me. I want
Got
it to
it.
be, indoors, outdoors, social. We had better ones, but basically the part you had describing kind of a good town meeting. And so you think, oh,
Yeah,
most people think this is very important, but they find
Yeah.
this less important. And then that way our recommendation doesn't, do the right thing. So I would say positive, forming questions in the positive, and asking people what would take to participate. And then actually, they probably wouldn't fill out the survey, but it's like, even give them the option, like, I'm just not going to participate. I'm happy with the way things are. I'm just not going to participate, because
Yeah,
then we
sure.
won't keep trying to get everybody to come when they're like, look, I'm totally happy, which is what Carmen's
Sure.
point was, and really hoping to gauge that, which is what I think we can see in the 2020 town resident survey is people are satisfied with a lot in town. And so I want to make sure that that's captured, whether it's anew in our survey or, from the data that we have existing.
Got it. Good. Thank you. We're getting close to 1/2 past. Kari, thank you for sitting with us for so long. I want to give you a chance to, if you have any additional comments. I have one really wacko question for you, but I'll wait and see if you have any.
Nothing's wacko in this office. We get all kinds of questions.
All right. Do you have any questions about all the survey stuff that we've talked about, or any comments about that?
Well, thinking about voter activity, I do wonder if there's any value in reaching out to those people who might have shown up to only 1 or 2 in the last 5 years. And
Exactly.
why
Yeah.
was that? What was
Yeah.
the issue? Maybe they don't want to share what the issue was, but what did
Yeah.
they think? What
Yeah.
kept them from coming back? Not necessarily in the negative, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
I
I like data, right? So I think what comes to mind is if we can tag the elections or tag the town meeting nights with what some of the signal issues might have been, and then see if there's any association between sort of the few timers and what was going on at meeting, that might tell us something. But then beyond that, what got you out, yeah. So,
Right.
yeah.
Related to that, I've added a few, and we have very few spreadsheets of poll book data since we started implementing electronic check-in. That's interesting because it gives us a timestamp
Right.
of when people checked in, so you can see the flow against what was happening during town meeting.
Yeah, we're not intentionally not discussing electronic voting tonight, or clickers, and I think we have, as a committee, we have some homework to do in terms of developing the right set of questions to explore. So I'd like to loop back to you later on clickers, but it's something that is sort of sitting here as well. But my
This is not
wacko
about
question.
clickers, though. This is just electronic check-in.
Okay, yeah, but so one comment was made, I think, from Leslie Koplow, which is that there's a workflow in getting those devices distributed, and that it can take time. And so if you think about the inflow of people checking in and the additional workflow of distribution, then the overall traffic flow of getting people into the meeting room changes a bit. And I think that the polling data could be interesting that way as well.
And related, all right, we won't talk about that. Never mind.
Yeah, okay. So sorry, I did it again. Tangent over here. My wacko question, this is sort of a shift in topic to a specific communications related question, which is that and talking about the collateral information that goes out to the voters about the agenda of town meeting. The warrant is it's a legal document which identifies what the topics of town meeting, the articles, are going to be. And there's regulation around that. And the select board opens the warrant. There's some period of time. The warrant closes, and your office, I believe, sends out a warrant. And what we have our practice right now is that there's some collateral information in the warrant mailing as well. Some descriptive information about the article. And some have it and some don't. There's some, I'll call sort of metadata in some cases about the amount that would be affected by, the amount of money being allocated or other things like that. So we have open town meeting. I was looking at Arlington's town meeting, which is representative town meeting. And so very different scenario, but what they do is they send out a warrant, which is like, the mailing is like 5 pages, 5 sheets of paper, 2-sided, right? It's just the warrant articles, no collateral information. It's just as lean as possible, really. And again, it's a representative town meeting, so the value of that notice is to tell people what's going to be going on at meeting, but and you can come and listen, but it doesn't help the representatives make decisions. What they do is later on they have an effective briefing book, so that there's links to all the collateral information around a given motion. And so if you're a representative at Arlington town meeting, the night of that night of meeting, you have this stuff, it's printed out, but you also have the stuff, available to you electronically for, what the select board recommendations are and so on. So a wacko idea for us would be that we like the idea of a briefing book. I think Keith Bergman, through his experience as a town manager in Littleton and in Provincetown, in particular in Littleton, has found the idea of a briefing book for town meeting to be pretty valuable for voters, where you're there, here's the article, you open up the book, and there's all the information about it, what the recommendations are, some pros and cons. And so for a voter who was previously low information, you have enough right there. And so the wacko idea would be, or the wacko question is, how practical is it to send out the legal notice of the warrant as soon as the warrant closes in a very sparse way, and then after some period of time, assuming people make their deadlines, to send out a fuller second mailing, which is a briefing book that has more information in it. That's 2 mailings, not 1 mailing. It's a mailing, early and then a mailing late. Is that a really wacko idea?
So first off, the warrant and finance committee report is mailed through the town manager's office.
Got it.
So and it is a timing issue. The warrant has the warrant book that's initially mailed out has the articles, which is as much detail as is needed and useful to residents.
Right.
To make sure that when there's a motion made on the article, that it is legal within the framework of the article. So it needs to have a certain level of detail. And then the summary is just to clarify for a voter who may not be up to speed on what's happening in town government, what the wording actually means. And then the finance committee report that comes out later has the recommendations as much as possible as they are available, along with the financial impact. The motions are tougher because those can change, and Shannon can speak to this, very close to town meeting, and that's a challenge for the town manager's office, and it's a challenge for my office because we're creating, the certified votes based on the motions, and the motion has to be exactly what the public saw at town meeting. So having that in hand before town meeting can be very challenging.
Ricky. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I think, thank you. You've answered my question, which is to say that that the town manager's office, I'll say, owns is the wrong word, but the town manager's office owns the composition of the document containing the warrant. That we all believe getting it out early in that sense is most helpful for voters. One of the things that the town meeting 24 survey showed is that everybody reads the warrant, right? That mailing, and that an electronic complement to the warrant that perhaps develops through the course of the sort of build up to town meeting, but that is able to aggregate the FinCom recommendations, if applicable, the select board recommendations, if applicable, a planning board and so on. A thing that's able to sort of put together that digest of all the information around, having it available electronically, is valuable for town meeting. But that's a thing that we can't rely on a mailing to support.
And also can't rely on access at town meeting.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. Hopefully we'll fix that one day, but yeah.
There
Good.
was a town meeting motion book that was produced, or town meeting materials book during COVID, because there
Right.
was no access to, I think
Yeah.
there was no way of really presenting it on a screen.
Oh, it'd be nice to see that. Yeah. Good. Good. All right. Thank you, Car. Kristen Haggerty, I'm going to recognize you.
And Eric, was your kind of question or thought behind the, you know, when the warrant closes, were you really thinking about generating interest and saying, okay, if we let people know what general topics are going to be on town meeting, that will give them enough time to research them if they want? Is that what you were thinking about, something early?
We have to get a notice out, I think, but we also want the voters to be fully informed. And not all the information that will help the voters be fully informed is available at the time that the notice needs to go out. And so the question was, in a way, do we couple the notification with the bundling of the information? And I think the answer is that we just need to sort of find a way to build up the information and make it always available and easy to
Okay.
find. Yeah, so it's almost like if the warrant could go out with a QR code for each article. You know, you go to the town website and boom, there's all this stuff in the article. That would be kind of cool, but that's a solution. Katie, I'll recognize you, please.
Yes, just one comment on that. This brought up a point about like accessing information. The lack of Wi-Fi in the high school
Yeah.
is a big problem because you just can't look anything up. You can't use a QR code to look up more information when you're there. Like for me,
Yeah.
I had a babysitter and I couldn't even be reached there. So like I wasn't even comfortable being there, not being able to be accessed by my children.
Yeah.
So that is a big problem that I don't know if it's in our remit, but
I
need
think
to
that was
fix
when
that.
that's when we had the little problem with the cyber attack. I don't think it's always like that. However, your point, the bigger point is, if we choose a different location, would internet Wi-Fi access be critical to having it? And it sounds like that might be one of our recommendations, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I'm picturing
Yeah.
like how great it would be to have like outside at Emerson Field or you know, Ride Out
Right.
or, you know, something like that. But then it's like, well, could we do that and still have internet access? So I think your larger point
Yeah.
is really important.
Yeah,
That's a good
will
point.
we have cell service downtown someday? I don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say like
Uh,
at the field, we might have cell service, but yeah, we might need Wi-Fi
Yeah.
for computer access to things and whatever, but yeah, that is a good point. But yes, we need
That's
Wi-Fi. I
that's your
didn't
big
realize
point,
there was
yeah.
a reason behind it, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, that
we
was
need
it
Wi-Fi.
was an unusual thing just that time.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Got it. So I'm going to move towards concluding our meeting. Is there any business that people had to raise that I overlooked today? I'm just going to ask for
Nothing that you overlooked, but anything in terms of a timeline, and like we talked about having this in the fall, like, you know, how can we help move things?
yeah.
Because I would
So-
imagine survey generational, you know, take a few iterations, particularly if we want to kind of put it in front of,
Yeah.
you know, everybody who needs to approve.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Kristen. So I think I'm going to take as an action item to draft, my awkward survey, in time for our next meeting in 2 weeks. And we can look at that and talk about that. I think, Alice, you'll let us know what you think a good timeline is for a communication plan. Again, you know, I think that, I think we wouldn't want to put, even if we had it in hand right now, we wouldn't want to put a survey out, I think, until the end of September, because we want to get, we want people to be back in town. We want the parents to be over the hump of starting the school year. It sounds as though we want to be in where the meeting cycles have started again. So we
And
can
I
get
love
something.
the idea
Yeah.
of the high school kids in 8th grade. I would love to see more participation from our youth.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. So it sounds like the earliest realistic date we want to post a survey or open a survey would be October 1st. And I can only look at working forward from making up a set of questions, and then beginning to sort of project that into a potential communication plan. But that's all the time info I have.
And then do we, I imagine Carmen might want to review them. Do we have the town manager? Do we know kind of who needs to review and approve them?
Yeah, that's
I
a
would
good,
imagine it doesn't
yeah.
have to be legally reviewed, I don't think.
right. Well, actually, no, I think action items relating to that. I think it would be helpful for to have a conversation, I'll say with the town manager's office, around support for a survey mailing. I think it would be helpful to have to do some research and have a conversation again with the town manager's office about concerns about disclosure of personal information, and the reality that what comes back in the survey is public, so that we don't screw anything up that way. So I think as a point of coordination, those are pretty important, and that we don't control that timing. Katie, please.
Just in terms of formulating the survey, I really like Kristen's idea of having like that Likert scale with different options or things we're thinking about for the ideal town meeting. But if I'm not recalling incorrectly, I don't know that we've had a conversation about what that ideal town meeting looks like. So unless I missed that,
I
but
don't
maybe
have
that's
those-
something we
yeah.
should do.
Yeah, that'd be good. Actually, I think in the next meeting that we have, I think we should talk about ideal town meeting. We should talk about, we had some slides on it earlier, but we should talk about how do we know that we've made a real improvement with town meeting? Because it's hard to measure, right? I think, when we talk about improving town meeting or improving our local democracy, what criteria, especially what measurable criteria, come to mind? And I've been struggling with that question. And then the third thing is just what's a potential set of questions that we can start with as a really, really rough cut. Yeah, Katie?
I am now remembering your slides about that. I was
Yeah.
thinking maybe more of a like brainstorming session where we can like
Perfect.
throw out some ideas of like what that would look like in practice or what we would
Yeah.
change to make it more ideal.
So we're
something a
talking
little
about
bit more
solutions or-
tangible. Yeah, I guess
Okay.
solutions.
Yeah.
I don't know, is it too early for that?
No, it's not too early for that. Let me think about this for a second. I think my top priority is the survey questions, but I think a topic that would be interesting for both the nighttime subcommittee and this group would be knowing what we know right now. What would we consider, right? What would we really consider? And so I'll think about, do we want to bring it? We're not going to meet, the logistics group is not going to meet for another 3 weeks. We're going to meet in 2 weeks. And so maybe what we'll look to do is to have a joint meeting. I have to think about that, but I think the question about just, what do we know about solutions right now? What do we think would be really great? I think it might be appropriate to start getting into that, especially because when we look at things that we want to test as interventions in a survey, we're going to have some good ideas there. So I hope that addresses your point. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to move to close then, or I will determine that we're going to conclude at 3:38 p.m. Thank you everyone for this discussion.